Do you hear me well?
Yes, very well.
Perfect. So good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to have you joining this Teams call. I was going to say a few words before opening the floor to Grant and to André and Ulf. But I would like to take this occasion, as we do in general every month when we have that sort of Zoom update or Teams update, to update you about the work we have started to do a few months ago in France around the concept of MLETR. So, in brief, Paris Europlace, supported by ICC France and the Fintech Committee of ITFA. Paris Europlace, as you know, this is the Paris Financial Services-led body that is in charge of developing and promoting Paris as an international financial center. So Paris Europlace has taken the initiative to launch a new digital trade working group in order to drive the alignment of French law to MLETR. You remember, a number of you, I'm sure, you remember that MLETR means Model Law on Electronic Transferable Records. Under the support of the United Nations, UNICTRAL in particular, MLETR laid down the legal principles for the use of digital documents in trade finance and their recognition in each and every local laws. So the objective, obviously, of our working group is based on three main comments that are now fully accepted by the industry, the trade industry. Main comments and main objectives: harmonization, which is the necessity to harmonize as much as possible the laws of the jurisdiction implementing the MLETR. The second principle that we have adopted in France is technological neutrality. Allow different actors to participate in this market in the same way as the electronic signature and compatibility of solutions markets. And the third principle is the equivalence between control and possession of the electronic document. And obviously, we needed in France to take all of that, understand well the MLETR, and start looking at how we could contribute to this, as far as the French law is concerned, to this fundamental step in the digitization of trade finance. So the objective of Paris Europlace Working Group is to organize the transposition into French law of the MLETR. To do that, we capitalize on the work carried out by ICC and ITFA for many years. And we decided to bring together the most of the actors, players in the French market, whether they are banks, corporates, governments, agencies, etc., into this working group. I have to tell you that we have been extremely successful because probably there were some good maturity in the understanding of the topic. It has not been too difficult to capture into this working group the professionals from the industries. And then we divided this working group into three components, three sub-working groups. There is one that is technology, that is working on technological implication, tech, fintech, etc. That is led by André Casterman. We have one that is looking at all the consequences on the industry of adopting this major step in direction of digitization. This sub-working group is called Advocacy and is led by Christian Cazenave, that is with us today, and will probably say a word during this presentation. Christian works for SocGen and has a long experience in this area. And we have the legal, obviously, sub-working group that is working on regulatory and legal implications, that is driven by Maître Dominique Doise and Maître Eric Caprioli. So a solid framework, I have to say. We have started, first of all, to make recommendations to obviously to the French authorities. The legal sub-working group has been preparing, it's in French and it's relatively complex, but has been preparing a very nice draft document proposing to the French Ministry of Finance and the French Ministry of Justice several routes that could be followed from a legal standpoint to adopt the MLETR or to adapt the MLETR into French law. The work has been done during summer, by the way, which shows that despite the summertime, we are conscious that we need to accelerate. And some colleagues will probably comment more in detail, but after having been meeting the Ministry of Justice last week or even this week, no, last week, sorry, on Friday, and the Ministry of Finance, I mean, we got good traction. They are quite mobilized, and it's very likely that they will send us, meaning our Paris Europlace ICC working group, a letter of mission signed by the two ministers, which means that we will benefit from the support from now of a number of civil servants that are experts in that sector. So we are very pleased to tell you that obviously the legal component of the working group that is key, as you can imagine, otherwise we cannot discuss the rest of the agenda today. This legal component is making good progress. We have mobilized. Oops, sorry, I don't know who said that. So in short, we are quite comfortable with the evolution of our working group. Now, I'm going now to perhaps introduce Grant. Grant, you are the Director of Standards, Innovation and Research, Innovation and Research of BIMCO. BIMCO, you have been in the press recently because during summer, Grant, so you were working as well, like us, during summer. You published an electronic bill of lading standard for bulk shipping, if I remember. And together with André, we thought that because of the level of maturity, let's say, of this topic in France now, as you can see, we were a bit late. Now we are probably back in the pack. We thought it would be good to give you an occasion to meet with our members and to update us on where you stand. And therefore, we are delighted to have you on board today. We are very conscious that the development of e-bill of lading will depend a lot on the way the various key laws in the world will be modified. And I'm sure you agree with me, if big countries like the UK, and I know it's ongoing, like Germany, France, etc., US, accelerate on the transposition of the MLETR, that will give a good support for you to impose your electronic format of bill of lading. So, Grant, welcome on board. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much indeed, Philip. Yeah, I'd just like to, I've been listening to you and I'm very encouraged at this sort of maturity in the French market and the efforts you're putting into accelerating the digitalization process, especially in terms of the electronic bill of lading. That for us is music to our ears. I've entitled my talk today, Electronic Bills of Lading, the Holy Grail of Global Trade, because I still firmly believe that if we can succeed in terms of the electronic bill of lading, that it will open the door and pave the way for many other electronic documents used in trade, electronic processes. So it is quite a key document, and I think worthy of the attention that it's been given. Now, for those of you who may not be familiar with BIMCO as an organisation, we're the world's largest private international shipping organisation. We have nearly 2,000 members. We are a mature organisation. We've been around since 1905. And I think as a result of our history, we have quite a legacy of sort of witnessing major transitions in the shipping industry. In 1905, the shipping industry was going through a major transition from sail into steam engines. So it was towards the end of that period, but that's basically when BIMCO came into into being. So quite a major change in the shipping industry there. We've also witnessed the birth of the container back in the 1960s as well. A very significant change in the way cargoes were handled and developed in the 1960s. We were there when that happened as well. And now in the 2000s, 2020s, we're now looking at another major transition, that of digitalization in the shipping industry. And BIMCO is here to support that particular initiative and hopefully lend a helping hand based on its extensive experience of the shipping industry. Who are we in terms of our membership? We are largely a ship owners organisation. They are the core of our membership, but we also have quite a broad representation as well: ship brokers, ship agents, lots of associated companies, charterers, legal organisation, P&I clubs. It's a very broad church in our membership, so it's quite an extensive and broad range of input we get amongst our members. Our members operate in over 136 different countries. And I think what this slide shows us quite graphically that when it comes to Greece, we have a lot of members in Greece because that is the very heart of the shipping industry. Many ship owners down in Greece, and most of them are operating in the bulk sector. So that's a big part of our business there. A big part of our membership is in Greece, but very much a global organization. Our members are right around the world. We are not simply a dry cargo or even a bulk shipping organisation. We represent all sectors of the shipping industry, so we're very much representative in the tanker fleet, in dry bulk, and in the container fleet as well. And essentially, we're representing around about 60% of the world's merchant tonnage amongst our membership, so a very sizable and influential organisation. In terms of our main goals, I guess the one we really want to focus on here, yes, we're out here to create a level playing field, a fair means of parties operating in the shipping industry, but we're here to also support businesses through standardization and harmonization. And one of our key tasks, so one of the things that we've been doing for over 100 years, is developing standard documents, including standard bills of lading for the shipping industry, making sure we can all work off the same set of terms and conditions to make it much easier for people to do business across the globe. So that's a main task for us. And as we move away from the paper world, we feel there's a very important role for us to digitalize these processes and practices as well. And that's through delivering information and developing standards. So that's a key focus and objective of our organization. 25 is a very important number as far as I'm concerned, because it means 25 years since I first attended a conference which they talked about electronic bills of lading. It was when I first started at BIMCO, and I attended a conference, and it was all about an organization called the Bill of Lading Registry Organization, which we nowadays better know as the Bolero Project or the Bolero Association. But it's significant, isn't it? It's a quarter of a century since I first attempted, or first went along to one of these conferences. They were talking about it. People were very excited. Everyone said, "Yeah, this is the way forward," and everything. And yet, in now those 25 years, we really haven't made too much progress in making electronic bills of lading mainstream. But I think it's very timely now. That quarter century has elapsed. I think now is the time. Often people come up with ideas that are not ready for their time. I think a lot of things are coming together now to make sure that this does actually happen here and now. I often think, when I talk to people about electronic bills of lading, people are often aware of them. They're often very supportive of them. They perhaps don't really know quite how much goods are carried on electronic bills of lading in our world in terms of world trade. So if this pie chart represents world trade on an annual basis, at the moment we're seeing something in the region of less than 1.3% of goods are transported in electronic bills of lading after 25 years. So we're a long way from making this mainstream. We've seen over the past couple of years good and encouraging growth in this area, but we've still got a long way to go. Figures or a graphic produced by the Digital Containers Shipping Association, Ship Owners Association, have indicated as far as the liner industry is concerned, they can recognize there's an immediate value to the liner industry by going digital. They reckon it costs 3 times as much to handle a paper bill of lading. So digital one, so you can see immediately there should be cost savings, which they estimate at $4 billion per year, even if we just had a 50% adoption of electronic bills of lading in the liner sector. I'm at pains to point out here, this is the liner sector. They are producing huge numbers of bills of lading every year, something in the region of 45 to 50 million bills of lading. So it's an obvious cost saving if they can digitalize that. In the bulk sector, it's a slightly different story. but we have far fewer bills of lading issued per shipment, and the numbers could be hovering around sort of 1 million bills of lading per year. So the persuasion and the arguments that we put in here to sort of persuade the bulk shipping industry to move to electronic bills of lading, they need slightly different arguments. They're not going to see these massive cost savings in terms of processing paper bills of lading. We need to look at other arguments to encourage them to move in that direction. It's important, I think, to remind ourselves when we talk about the digital bill of lading, the electronic bill of lading, it isn't simply just a scanned-in copy of a paper bill of lading. It has to be this combination of a legal framework with the technology that allows us to replicate the paper bill of lading. That's how it functions in our world today. And the three functions of the bill of lading, acting as a receipt for the goods to say you've taken those goods on board, as a contract of carriage, maybe the voyage charge party associated with it. Perhaps most importantly of all, the fact that the bill of lading is a document of title, and therefore the holder and the possessor of that bill of lading is entitled to that cargo. How do we deal with that in the electronic world? Very, very important. The world is very much attached to paper bills of lading. It is a kind of a mindset thing. I always find myself when I travel at airports, I think, you know, the human being, even though we've all got smartphones, the number of people I see holding in one hand a smartphone, in the other hand a printed out boarding pass, it shows that our mindset is we somehow have this sort of feeling of tangibility with a piece of paper that means a lot more to us than something that's done electronically at the moment. And although that applies equally to the consumer taking a flight, it often applies to us in the business world as well, that we've got some challenges ahead of us moving out of this paper environment. Now, these are kind of well tried and tested things. I think everybody here will know what the disadvantages of paper bills of lading are. The huge handling costs and administration of paper bills of lading, sending them around the world. It's a very, very costly business. When it comes to physical delivery of these bills of lading, our industry, and it's not just the tanker sector, it's also the dry bulk sector as well. What has been happening over the years is that paper bills of lading have simply not been able to arrive at the discharge port when the cargo is ready to be discharged, and therefore they can't be handed over in exchange for the cargo. So it's now become an established practice in our industry that letters of indemnity are issued. The person wants a cargo, they haven't got the bill of lading to hand over, so they issue a letter of indemnity. This we see as a practice that certainly BIMCO doesn't favour and doesn't support. It accepts that there's no immediate solution at the moment until people adopt electronic bills of lading more widely. But then it's the ship owner taking a risk. He's accepting a sort of guarantee, which often isn't sort of countersigned by a bank, saying that, you know, you deliver the cargo to me, and if anything goes wrong, I'll make sure you're all right. It's just a piece of paper, and it doesn't often carry much weight. Fortunately, we don't see too many cases on it, but nevertheless, the owner is taking this risk of misdelivery, which he will be on the hook for and may not be covered by his insurance. So there is a risk there as well. And I think also, even in the banking process, I think, you know, the paper bill of lading is so slow through the process that there are several banks involved. Sometimes we see that the banks themselves aren't receiving the bill of lading before they need to take action, and often they're also accepting letters of indemnity as well. So there's an element of risk there associated with the paper bill of lading. And of course, fraud as well. It's very, very easy to make changes to a paper bill of lading. Very, very easily done indeed. I think that's often underestimated in the trade. Quite often you can make multiple copies of bills of lading and use them, misrepresent them in some particular way. So there's the aspect of fraud as well that we really see as these key disadvantages and key drivers for moving people away from the paper bill of lading. In terms of what does the electronic bill of lading bring us in the way of advantages, well, obviously, simply the speed of transfer. We can be almost instantaneous. That has an impact on payment cycles as well, which is something that the industry needs to look at and accept. Generally, the lower administrative and handling costs. We're not carrying bits of paper around the world. It's all being done on electronic platforms. So there's cost savings there as well. And generally, the electronic bills of lading will be less prone to making clerical errors and typos. If they are made, then it's much easier to fix them than in the paper world, which is a much more complex process to make changes to a paper bill of lading. And of course, the reduced risk of fraud there as well. But on the counter side, we have the risk of cyber security and cyber risks as well. It needs to counter that bit as well. But generally, a reduced risk of fraud that we're seeing here. As far as BIMCO's perception is concerned, yes, we would love the paper bill of lading to disappear very, very quickly indeed. I think the reality is that that's not likely to happen quite as quickly as all of us would like. Certainly some cargo owners, and I think banks may also fall into this conservative regime as well. There's sometimes a little bit of reluctance there to move over to these new systems. People don't necessarily want to be the pioneers, the first ones through the door. They recognize that they will have to operate dual systems for a while, so that adds additional cost to the system. So sometimes they're holding back, and that will slow the process down, I would think, to a certain extent. Also, in terms of bill of lading laws, Philippe mentioned earlier on about legislative changes that are being looked at by a number of countries as well. We obviously need 2 countries to comply with. When you're having a shipment, there needs to be 2 countries' laws that need to be complied with. It's a process that's starting now, but we can imagine it will take a number of years to get to that stage where we have the international trading countries making their changes to the laws. And of course, we do actually have some national laws out there. I think India is an example that do actually require paper documents. It's not that they're ambiguous on what a bill of lading should be. They actually state that they require paper documents with handwritten signatures and stamps. So again, there's changes still need to be made in the industry, and some countries will move faster than others. So we can imagine the paper bill of lading will be for a while. It's going to be a transition process where we see the 2 systems running side by side. What we have in terms of solutions for the electronic bill of lading, as I mentioned right at the very beginning, we've had Bolero around for a quarter of a century, joined shortly after by the S-Doc system. But in recent years, we've seen a whole load of other players come into this arena here, into this particular space, and we now have 8 different platforms providing electronic bills of lading solutions that have been approved by the international PNI group of PNI clubs, which gives them sort of the surety of insurance. So we have a little bit of fragmentation in here, lots of different platforms to choose them, but essentially the message is the technology is there to do electronic bills of lading now. It's there, okay? Things will get better in the future and easier, but basically we have this raft of solutions available to the market at the moment. What these systems, where they perhaps have restrictions on, they are club-based system or walled gardens. Essentially, it requires all of the participants, all of the stakeholders that are going to handle and be involved in that bill of lading from the point of issue to sign up to a collective agreement that basically creates a legal agreement that this is how the bill of lading will be handled, to make sure that it's given the legal equivalence to a paper bill of lading. The problem with these systems are that it's fine if everyone works with them and is very happy with these systems, but if something goes wrong, if one of the members don't want to sign into the system or they want to break out and issue a paper bill of lading, it creates legal uncertainty. So they are a solution. They work very well as long as everyone's on board, but they're not foolproof unless we have complete sort of sign up to the system. But that's what's available to us at present. So looking to the future, what we're looking at from BIMCO's perspective, how do we identify the problems and what solutions are we looking at? I think we have the technology there now. I think the technology will get even easier. BIMCO isn't in the business of promoting any particular technological solution. We remain completely agnostic to what solutions are to be used. That's entirely for the market, for the banks and the carriers, whatever, decide what solutions works best for them. But we have some technology there, and we can only imagine the technology will improve as things go on. So we've got the technology. What we're missing is the ability to exchange bills of lading between platforms. We don't have interoperability as yet. And so I can imagine for the banks, for instance, having to sign up to multiple platforms, that can itself cause an overhead of resources or whatever. If we had interoperability, then it would be much easier. People could essentially think about issuing a bill of lading in the same way you would send an electronic message, an email. We don't think about what kind of platform the person who's going to receive the email is going to use. We can just send it from Outlook, and they might be using Gmail or Apple Mail or whatever. We don't have to think about it. There's interoperability between all these systems because standards have been developed, and that's very much what we're focusing on here in terms of BIMCO's activity. So we have lack of interoperability at the moment. Electronic bills of standards are the fabric on which, or the foundations for what this is built. The BIMCO electronic bill of lading standard for bulk shipping, that has been produced in the summer, and we believe that's a very important stepping stone towards interoperability.
May I interrupt you, because this is the heart of the issue. You were right in saying that it took 25 years to mobilize the industry around the necessity to have electronic bills of lading. If I speak as an ex-head of investment bank, without showing the direction of what I'm going to say, there have been a couple of issues and frauds in the industry, let's say the last 2 years, that has been an element to put on board, to take on board the senior management of banks and corporates, if you see what I mean. So there is clearly an acceleration. As you can see, we knew that one of the milestone, or the milestone was to very much modify the law. It's not that easy, as you can imagine, but even in old countries like France, now we have understood we have to do it. Having said that, the interoperability is the fundamental problem. A number of those of the names that you have highlighted, plus multiple initiatives that is not on your previous slide, but you and I have in mind, have tried to set up some kind of closed environment, expecting that if they were to impose their format, they would be the king of the game. And unfortunately, it has not worked. And now several initiatives are lacking a capex, which is good to some extent because it will oblige the players, in particular the 8 that you have on your slide, to team up and agree on how to organize the interoperability. So the pressure will be on their shoulders now, I tell you, because if we make the effort to harmonize, the MLETR, etc., and accept this, we need to see progress in the way the players will going to work together to create this interoperability. So from where you sit, and I agree, maybe it has a bigger impact on the container shipping business, but never mind, you are a great expert. From where you sit, do you think it is now understood by the tech companies that are in the heart of the model today that they have to organize the interoperability? Or do you think there is a need again for a supranational entity, whoever it could be, to impose a normalization?
Yeah, no, I think it's very, very good indeed, Philip, what you've raised. From my perspective, I think, yes, we've moved away from a few years ago. It used to be like there would be one system to fix the world and everyone would adopt that and that'd be really easy. That's not the reality. I think we're going to see lots of different systems. They just need to communicate with each other and we need this interoperability. What I can say in terms of the existing platform providers, yes, there was an initial resistance to even talk about interoperability because they're essentially fighting for a tiny bit of market share at the moment, less than 1.3%. There's not a lot out there. More platforms are joining all the time and they're all like fighting for a piece of the business. I think they've now woken up to the fact that the only way they're going to sort of succeed and grow is if they can manage to get more people using electronic bills of lading. We need to see a massive growth in that, and therefore there's a bigger part of the pie for them all to share. The market will eventually determine which are the best systems, which are the ones to use, and the ones that aren't very good will hopefully fall away. What I can say in terms of what these platforms are doing, through our work with other organizations, we have been talking to all of these platforms, and they are now beginning that discussion. Is there a route to interoperability? And from a meeting I had back in the summer, I think the conclusion is that yes, it can be done in terms of legal and technical interoperability. There's a lot of work to be done, but they're starting that journey. I believe that. I think that they've recognized now that for them, that is the only positive way forward. This is what the industry needs and demands, but for them as well. They cannot grow as businesses fighting over a tiny share. They need to work with us to grow that share, and that's only going to happen through creating interoperability. So yes, I would say we are on that path, and that's we very much support BIMCO.
Thank you. As it is an important problem, I'm sorry to interrupt your great presentation. I just wanted to hear from André, who was just attending this annual ITFA conference in Porto. Maybe Grant, you were as well attending the same conference. André, what has been discussed in the corridors regarding the effort to be made to accelerate this interoperability across systems?
Yeah, it was a major discussion topic indeed, and as you will see from my next presentation, we have had the pleasure to see a first transaction, not on bill of lading, but on another negotiable instrument, which is part of MLETR. This is the promissory note. Lloyd's engaged as part of the DNI initiative and applied our interoperability framework which has been implemented by the Enigio document technology, and that type of DLT-based technology allows basically to put trust and apply MLETR at document level. So there is more than negotiable, there is more than the promissory note or the bit of exchange, which are the two instruments on the banking side, which are important for the Middle East and the UK. I know it's less important in France. However, on the bill of lading also, we had some key players in Porto, such as DP World, which is going also into the electronic bill of lading space, and for SME financing, for connecting banks, for putting indeed more data around those shipping flows they operate. And they are also looking at making sure they are interoperable as part of the DNI initiative. I will come back on that with a few slides, so you see a bit more concrete elements. So the interoperability is a key topic. Well, it has been for a few decades on the banking side, but important is to understand that there are two layers. There's the business layer, business language, which is what indeed BIMCO is delivering with the standards. And I will let Grant proceed with his presentation to focus on this. But and there is a technical layer, because more and more it's not about being all on the same platform to be interoperable technically, but it's all about exchanging data sets in a trusted way and applying some new technologies like encryption, DLT, electronic signatures. There's a mix of technologies we need to put trust in the document, so that a document can leave one platform, go into another platform, or can leave one bank, go into another bank, and there is still trust in the document without requiring or trying to force everyone to be on the same platform, because that will not happen.
Okay, Grant, sorry, because now the key focus is on your BIMCO electronic bill of lading standard that you published. Have you received a warm welcome from the players?
Yes, we have. In actual fact, it has been very well received by the various platforms, and we're in the process now of trying to set up a few pilot studies so we can actually test the standard with a few stakeholders. So yeah, I would say it has been warmly received, and I'm very encouraged by the fact that it's been warmly received by the various platforms. And I say we're also having these discussions on interoperability. So from our point of view, the message we're getting is that yes, these platforms are really moving ahead. They realise this is the way forward, not just for them, but it's what the industry needs to make this all work. We're not going to get some single solution out there. It's lots of platforms that can communicate with each other and work in a sort of trust environment, as Andre has said, but have sort of a method of moving that trust between platforms. So I think hopefully we'll see a lot of activity in there now. We're starting the process of the pilot studies with the standard. Those standards will be used in terms of also testing interoperability between the platforms as well. So I do see some good movement there. But again, fundamentally the basis of all of this is making sure that we publish these open standards in the first place, which I think is quite critical. That's the first step, and then we move to the interoperability thing. So just moving ahead in my presentation there, sort of having identified the lack of interoperability, one of the other issues that, of course, if you're touching upon yourself, of course, is the lack of uniformity in national laws as well that give the same legal status as paper bills. We've seen Singapore adopt the MLETR. The UK is very active on that as well. I don't know whether that will pass into law this year or early of next year. Yourselves are working on France, I think Germany as well. There's a few other countries active on that as well, which is very, very encouraging. And then the speed of the process is also quite accelerated as well. So that's
and by the way, sorry, I'm again interrupting, but I think it's important for the colleagues to know that in our great conversation with the regulator to some extent, or what we were explaining, frankly, is we have a decent statistic showing the key import and export market, that touch France. And therefore, it will be our strong interest, as soon as we have adapted or we are in good shape to adapt the law, to encourage our key business trade partners, the ones that are important to France, to also adopt, obviously, adapt, obviously, their own national laws. So when you do that, you can ensure that an increase in the speed of adoption.
Yeah, that's very good. I mean, that helps. I mean, everyone needs to be working together and pushing on this. So I think that is very important as a point there. And all I was going to just add there that, you know, we've got the unitrial model law. I think this is a very, very important development. It's really encouraging to see so many states working towards that. You know, from our perspective, we see the model law and the implementation by states as not necessarily a long-term goal, but we see sort of, we don't, how do I put this the best way? As an industry, in the shipping industry, we want to push electronic bills of lading. We want to do it now. We don't want people to sit back and say, okay, well, let's wait for the law to be developed in all these countries and then we'll move. Because we have technical solutions now that allow you to do it. They're not perfect, but you can do it. And in the medium term, we'll get interoperability, which helps it even more. And that will make the whole process of working with electronic bill of lading a much more seamless process. And then the next step is the legislative developments as well, which will open up the whole thing as well. So we kind of see 3 phases here as well. But BIMCO as an organization is very keen to push to our members and the industry, you know, don't wait for stuff to happen. You can do this now. In the future, it's just going to be easier to do. So that's kind of our message there as well, because we're conscious that if we talk too much about just legislative change, people might interpret that it's something still to happen and therefore I should hang back. I think if we really want to push on electronic bills of lading, we need to be active in the marketplace now in persuading and encouraging people, but with a clear message. It's only going to get easier in the future as we have all these legislative changes. So that's our kind of message there. What I'd call the sort of catch-22 situation for the industry moving forward. This is something we've heard from a few countries. It's clearly not the case in France or whatever, but, you know, changing legislation in countries, especially, you know, countries that are maybe not as well resourced as some European countries, it costs a lot of money to change legislation. And part of that is we see the government's a bit of reluctance to push ahead with this. They can spend a lot of money on changing other legislation in the country, things that they might think are a greater priority. And their argument would often be, well, you know, we'll introduce legislation allowing electronic bills of lading, provided business in our country uses them to a greater extent. But of course, business is not going to use them to a greater extent because the legislation isn't there to support them. And we get this sort of round circular argument. And I think that is some obstacle that needs to be overcome. I'm conscious that the International Chamber of Commerce is working very hard with this, you know, national organizations to persuade governments to do this. And I think it's a very, very important initiative, because otherwise I think we could get into these circular arguments. We can't really get the business to use electronic bills of lading more, you know, if there's no prospect of legislative support as well. So I think that's one obstacle we've overcome. It is, I say, it's very encouraging to see countries now pushing beyond that and encouraging other countries that are in trade partnerships with to move on the law as well. You may not agree with any of this. This is kind of our interpretation about why we often don't see banks being very enthusiastic about moving to electronic bills of lading. There's no doubt about it that, you know, banks are very keen on digitalization. They can see the benefits of these processes, but they don't have unlimited resources. And I think one aspect of that is sometimes that, you know, if you're devoting resources to manually checking paper bills of lading, you're not going to see paper bills of lading vanish in the next few years or whatever. You have to devote resources to that. And then you also have to have a team that's going to be checking bills of lading or working with bills of lading in an electronic process. But the trouble with that is we're seeing fragmentation. We've already got 8 platforms out there. I think there is at least one more waiting in the wings that I'm aware of in terms of systems approved by the International Group of P&I clubs. So there are lots of different platforms. So, you know, if you've got only a limited amount of resources to focus on digitalization in the banking system, and you have to train your staff to use 8, 9 different systems until we get interoperability, that could be a slight barrier and an obstacle to be overcome. So we're seeing that for some banks why they're not that keen to push on it. And maybe not the case in the UK.
But you know, you are right. Obviously, I've been in the banking industry 35 years, but there are many reasons. I'm not going to be very long, but it is evident, I tell you, that sort of topic was not very much escalated to the top of the banks. And when it was, there were arbitrage in terms of CapEx spend to digitize the bank. And there were more important topics like in payments, you know, or in account management, etc., or also in security services. Okay, so that's one point. The second point is banks have been losing time in trying to probably set up their own standard into between banks to some extent. Now, it was not a waste of time, because they contributed, as you know, to set up that sort of standards, and now there is a strong commitment, even at bank level, that it has to happen also for a question of fraud. Everyone understands now that digitally you have a better chance to control the fraud than if it is through exchange of a paper document, etc. You know, so I think there is a new vision on the banking side, and also a capacity for the banks now to understand better the fintech world and to team up with fintechs where they have been talking to each other. There have been multiple proof of concept. And the proof of concept is great, but it's just and remain a proof of concept. So now you will see that the banks are on the other way around. Now they are going to push to move the proof of concept into industrial solutions so that they could change the way they work, reduce their cost-income ratio, and it's super important what I'm going to say, instead of having only the large corporates using that sort of trade tools and having a difficulty for years to have the MMEs, I'm not saying the SMEs, you know, but at least the MMEs, mid-sized corporate, to utilize those solutions. Now, with the digitization of the tools, it will be much easier for us, the banks, to sell the product to some extent to medium-sized companies that are also huge exporters or importers, obviously. You know, so yes, it took time. Sorry for that. But there is a new momentum at the moment, even on the banking side.
May I add a few comments, please?
Yes, please, of course.
Here and fully concur with all comments, and thanks for inviting me in such a meeting. And really, this is an amazing demo here, and really appreciate about all comments. But as I mentioned here, I really fully concur with all comments except this slide, and I'd like to put some arguments also in what just Philippe mentioned. I mean, this what is written in this slide is true about 5 years ago, 5 to 7 years ago, and if I may say 10 years ago. Why? Because indeed the move toward digitalization in banks regarding trade has become a must 5 to 6 years ago. This is where all banks massively invested because of the availability of the new technology. This is something that we must consider. That technology was not at that place a few years back, but since 4 to 5 years, we clearly have a connection with all this capacity for new technology, leading banks to invest in digitalization. Invest in digitalization to fight against money laundering, terrorist financing, fraud. We moved the chance. I mean, we did really make the move years back for AML, terrorist financing, and fraud concerns, and first for compliance requirements, I would say KYC and others. But because of the cost approach as well, we cannot continue this way. As it's mentioned, you are right to mention that it's very much labor intensive, but we cannot afford any longer this. That's something we could afford years back, but this is behind us now, and the move has been done. There is a really cost approach which it's imposed to the banks to change our model, and this turn we took this move already. And last and least, it's also a requirement from our clients. Our clients are requesting us to move our model. So this is no longer true. This is, to my view, and this is what Philippe is right when mentioning that there has been arbitrage in the years back regarding where and when to invest in digitalization, mainly in trade finance. But now here we are, and that's the virage, or I don't know the English word, but the move has been taken, to my view, at least 4 to 5 years ago. That's what I went. But thanks for this brilliant demo.
Okay, no, thank you very much, Christian and Philip, for your comments here. I mean, I must admit, you know, when I was invited to do this presentation, one of the things that really intrigued me and wanted me to do this presentation is what is the banking view? Because of, you know, we've got this information, but we have never had a chance to talk to you in the banking community before like this. So, you know, I was being slightly provocative because I want you to tell me, you know, are you the obstacles? You know, it's amazing. When we talk to all of the stakeholders involved in it, everyone says electronic bills are a great solution. No problem with that at all whatsoever. The problem is some other party, some other stakeholders, and some will point to the carrier, some will point to the shipper, some will point to the banks. It's always somebody else that's causing the problem and stopping them adopting electronic bills of lading. So, you know, it's great for us to get this back. I will be modifying my slide accordingly. But yeah, I mean, I wanted to get a reaction to it. So,
don't worry. I think what is quite interesting is what I was saying at the beginning is in this working group, because with in particular with André, we were conscious of the emergency of the situation. What we decided to do is to put together 3 families to some extent. That was not that much talking to each other all together. You know, bilaterally, yes, but not all together. Legal, practitioners, and fintech. Because legal made good progress. I tell you, they are more open-minded than they used to be, you know, in front of the way or in front of the sort of obligation to utilize, you know, digital document instead of paper document. Okay, they had to make an effort to rethink a little bit and change their state of mind. Practitioners as well. There is a change of generation, obviously. The new generation will not gonna work like the old one. So we need to give them an environment, a working environment that is more adapted to their hopes, to their wishes. Okay? And this is true when you work on integrated front-to-back solutions. Otherwise, we're not gonna attract the new generation to replace us, right? Yeah. So that's, let's say, for the advocacy. And obviously the fintech, some of the fintech were thinking that they will lead the world on their own from their little corner. On one hand, if I may say, they accepted the Darwinian aspect of the fintech, meaning that you push something, you are not sure whether you're going to be the lead going forward, but at least you, if not, like we don't trade. I mean, it's a Darwinian story, but it's great because now we have some we trade colleagues that was seconded in we trade. You know, they are back to their bank after secondment with a new spirit, a new culture, right? But now again, the objective of this call and of this working group is to accelerate. We want to accelerate. And we are delighted with the initiative you have taken because BIMCO can write, I don't want to say the law, but at least can write the standard that will help everybody.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much for that. But yeah, I can't disagree with you. I think BIMCO does have a very important role here in terms of the business community and coming up with practical solutions to help push this forward and accelerate it. So, you know, that's very much our ambition level.
Sorry, Grant. Sorry to interrupt. Just before you continue, we've got a question from Merlin, who had his hand up.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see any hands.
Sorry. Hi, Alex. Hi, everyone. Actually, I posted it into the chat. Grant, nice to see you again, Andre.
Hi, Merlin.
I think one needs to challenge this from a bank's perspective is consider the high cost base that trade finance operations currently operate in within the banking environment, right? Due to the manual nature of the processes, it carries a high cost base. And if we are asked to subscribe to the multitude of channels providing electronic bills of lading, all this does is add to the cost base, which is going to have a negative impact on the business. So I really advocate for the interoperability, because if I can access it through one channel and it doesn't matter where the electronic bill of lading originated or where I need to send it through, that is how you're going to drive bank adoption. Otherwise, you know, if I have to subscribe to 10 different channels, it's going to be a big problem.
Absolutely, that's why we now push very hard for interoperability But we are in a better place if we have cleaned up our little corner, each of us, by pushing an adoption of the MLTR in the key countries, you know. Otherwise, you are in a perfect vicious circle. And you are not followed by the legal expert, the legal guys. So if the legal guys are not comfortable with an electronic document, they will never give you the sign-off to issue the letter of credit or to make a payment associated to whatever contract. You know, I know that because I was on the management of a bank, and I could agree with the approach taken. Maybe it was looking at a bit too conservative by the legal guys, and also vis-à-vis the regulators. I had that discussion with regulators when I was in England. So look, it's a journey. We are in huge progress. We try to combine now the initiative taken by the various entities in order to accelerate.
Yeah, no, thanks, Emma, as well. I mean, I absolutely sort of agree with your comments there as well. I mean, the interoperability, I think, for us is so fundamental and so important to push this thing forward. We just haven't had it before. But, you know, from the conversation I've had with the platforms, it does seem that, you know, they've got their heads around this. It is feasible technically and legally to do, as far as I know. There's a lot more work to be done on this. But I think that is the direction we're going. I think everyone now recognises that's how we sort of unlock all of this and how we overcome these perceived obstacles that many people have about why we should move to electronic bills of lading. So I think it is all very, very positive, and I think it's a very encouraging amount of momentum here. Okay. So tell me a little bit about, you know, where we're coming from. BIMCO is not working in isolation on this, as many of you know. It doesn't serve our industry and all the stakeholders at all, just for everyone to be doing things in isolation. We've talked about the dangers of fragmentation, and we see with the platforms at the moment. So we've become a founding member of the FIT Alliance, the Future International Trade Alliance, where we come together with a lot of other associations and bodies that are also driven by the same ambitions to encourage the greater use of electronic bills of lading. So we have the Digital Container Shipowner Association, the International Chamber of Commerce, FIATA, which represents freight forwarders, and of course SWIFT, who you'll all be very familiar with as well. So we're working together as a body, trying to sort of work together and make sure that the standards we individually produce for different sectors of the industry, DCSA working on the liner sector, ourselves working on the bulk sector, are essentially all from the same standard. So we're not working on different standards, we're working very, very closely together. So although we're looking at slightly different sectors, each of our sort of data sets or whatever have been closely crafted together to make sure they are an industry standard, regardless of which particular trade you're involved in. So that's an important aspect. It's not us working on isolation, it's a big grouping together, and it's so important for us to communicate with all the stakeholders and everybody involved and continue to work together with them. That's how we're going to get through and succeed in this, I think. So in terms of our standard that we've talked about already, we see ourselves as being very much a unique position in BIMCO, as being perceived, I think, in the shipping industry as very much a neutral body, a body that can promote and encourage standards. We have, you know, over 100 years working with paper standards. We're now very much poised to develop and establish and encourage the use of electronic standards as well for bills of lading. So we think we are an organisation that is best placed to do this. And the reaction we've got to the work we've done so far has been very, very positive indeed, and people are really keen to work with us on pushing this. So it's very encouraging, and we think we can help with the process, accelerating the uptake of electronic bills of lading. Just in very, very simple terms, I mean, this has been publicised over the summer as well. I mean, what we've created is a sort of a structured data set of 20 predefined data fields. It follows and it's aligned with the UN CFAC multimodal transport reference data model, and it's the same process that the DCSA have gone through with their own electronic bill of lading for the liner sector as well. So, you know, essentially a liner bill of lading has many more data sets than a bulk shipping bill of lading, so ours is essentially a subset of theirs, but the whole thing is aligned, so we're all working from the same page there. And it's an open standard and it's freely available. That's the only way we're going to push this thing forward. People start charging money for these things, it's never going to happen. We're going to have fragmentation and we're going to have multiple standards. We don't need that now. To push this on and get interoperability, it's going to be open and freely available standards, and that is essentially what we're here to do and what we're here to deliver. And of course, part and parcel of this is one thing to actually push out an electronic bill of lading standard. It's quite another thing to get it used and adopted. And so part of our work and part of our effort will be going out to our own industry and explaining to people, again, in very clear terms, what benefits this should bring to our industry. And we're now thinking as best we can, what are the incentives for ship owners working in the bulk sector? It's not processing costs essentially for them. But we've got to think what other incentives are. We think it's, it can help with managing risk and managing fraud in a big way that perhaps people haven't quite tuned into yet. I don't think they fully appreciate the risks of working with letters of indemnity on such a colossal scale as they do at the moment. So, that can well be one of the incentives for working on this. So we're creating a very strong message. We're working together with other Fit Alliance members. We're creating lots of material, whether it's videos or webinars or printed material, to get out to the industry. And we're physically getting out to the industry as well, attending lots of conferences, going to visit, shipping companies and talking to them about their interest and things. And the feedback, again, is very, very positive, but people they're not necessarily fully aware of the scale of the momentum of all of this, that there is lots of stakeholders involved, all wanting to make this succeed, and they need to have the information about what's available to them, what they can do now, what they can expect in the medium and the long term as well. So
can I ask you a question? And again, that's a question you have to keep in mind. I remain a generalist of this industry, not a specialist, but in parallel, there are a lot of work done by the Container Association to end up with the same approach. I'm sure you talk to them. I'm sure the nature of the bill of lading is the same, but the content is different, whether you talk about bulk or whether you talk about container. But have you been trying to harmonize what can be harmonized? Adopting a sort of approach that was useful in the Swift industry, as an example,
Yeah. I mean, fundamentally, we are working together and we meet on a very, very regular basis as the Fit Alliance to talk to the DCSA, to talk to Swift as well, to make sure what we're putting out there is harmonized as best it possibly can be, because we think that's fundamentally important to the industry. We've got to recognize that in the liner sector, it consists of a relatively small number of very large companies moving a very large number of containers. We move to the bulk sector, it's quite a different story. There is a vast number of individual ship owners shifting sort of very large cargoes. And so we see less bills of lading issued, but many, many players involved, many more players than in the liner sector. So it's a slightly different audience and it's a different industry structure, and they're putting different things in the bills of lading. But we're doing our best as, BIMCO is an organization that has members operating all of these types of vessels to make sure we have a very harmonized approach to these standards and to all the things we're doing connected to bills of lading. So, yeah. To that.
So you see your presentation has been very popular and there have been a lot of questions, etc. So that's good, but we have a long agenda. Is there any other messages you would like to share with us?
No, that's the key one. So, I mean, essentially, we're all working together. I think it's important to flag up the fact we're working in coalition with other big organisations as well. We're always delighted to speak to other stakeholders and bodies such as yourself. I think it's really, really important to have this dialogue so we all know what we're all doing and we're all working to the same common goal. And I think, together we can definitely achieve this. But, I really appreciate the opportunity for giving us today.
Thank you very much. André, maybe you should take the lead to introduce Ulf. And if I understand well, you want to focus now on the latest progress on the DNI initiative.
Yeah, I mean, we are definitely here to talk about interoperability. That means, as I put in the chat, following a question from Dominique, thank you, Dominique, and Merlin and others who are so active on the chat. Interoperability is definitely, in my view, about two layers: the business layer. And Grant just offered to us a great presentation on what BIMCO is doing to progress business standardization in the bulk shipping world, and DCSA and the whole alliance are doing more work around the same line for containers, and at the level of the ITFA DNI initiative, what we have done is focusing on indeed the technical layer, because once you have a common language, you need to be able to exchange it technically, securely, making sure you get the data from authenticated counterparties. And that's the whole point of the DNI initiative. So just a few words on the latest progress on this, and then Ulf who is an expert in transport and logistics, will also tell more about it. So if we can move to the next slide, Alex, thank you. Just as I said during my answer to Philip's question, last week in Porto, we focused very much on the early adopters of various innovations. We are progressing on the ITFA Fintech initiatives, on trade distribution and on MLETR. Lloyds took the lead in terms of applying MLETR technology for digital promissory note. That was announced in August, and we talked more about it in Porto. The goal here is definitely to put trust into the file, into the document, so that the document can be delivered to various stakeholders. Could be other banks, could be corporates, could be platforms. In this case, we're talking about PromNote, but the same process from a technical perspective would apply for a bill of exchange. As the common law has not been updated, that's for the coming months. The English common law has not been updated. This transaction was performed under contract law, but in this case, that was good enough. So contract law is also a very valid solution for those who want to proceed like Lloyds. Before the common law, the English common law allows for indeed MLETR to be applicable. So of course, the banks don't want to focus only on the instruments they produce, promissory notes, bills of exchange, and they also want to progress on the bill of lading, which is why indeed those talks and the input from Grant is so important. We are at the very early start of this process, but I think we are all on the right track. On the next slide, indeed, you see the players we are working with as part of this initiative, and DP World was also in Porto last week at the ITFA annual conference, and also demonstrated their commitment to interoperability. And I emphasize the message that Merlin put in the chat here, that if banks don't pay attention, we're going to end up with each platform coming with a technical interoperability solution, because even if they implement the BIMCO business standards, you need to think about the technical link, the technical messaging connection, whichever word you want to use to describe it. But the way to deliver the information is key. And so it's really up to the banks to take the lead and tell those platforms, we need standardization at technical layer, in addition to the standardization that BIMCO, DCSA, and maybe others are bringing to that electronic bill of lading space. So these are the key players we are working with today. As Thomas said in the chat, the vendors are important. So China Systems, Finastra, Mitigram on the corporate side, SureComp also are all committed and have implemented the core MLETR technology that we have selected for this DNI initiative at ITFA, which is provided by Enigio, and we'll hear more about them. So on the next slide, I want to highlight how our technical interoperability model that we call the DDoC for digital document. It's based on DLT, public DLT, so as an interoperable and traceable infrastructure for electronic documents. But the key value is not in the DLT. The key value is really provided in the encrypted documents. And those documents are digital assets with a traceability on the blockchain. You can use the wording NFT, non-fungible token, on the blockchain if you want to use the latest language terms coming from that space. But the key is that this technical envelope is not doesn't require any the two parties to be connected on the same platform. And that's what the whole encryption space and DLT space brought to us. And we are taking advantage of those new technologies to provide interoperable documents. And then they can include business standards developed by BIMCO, we just heard from Grant, DCSA, BAFT, or ITFA itself. We have developed one for bills of exchange and promissory note, a legal template, or additional standards that ICC-DSI, for instance, would recommend, or that the industry would develop, or that you develop on a proprietary basis. So I really want to highlight the focus on those two layers, business standardization, which is instrument specific and performed by those associations that are in specific industries like BIMCO, and the technical standardization, which is more generic and cuts across various instruments. And on the next slide, want to be more specific about it, about those different layers. You see bottom up technical layer as provided by DDoC specification, and Enigio is the first vendor we identified who has implemented those technical standards. The business standards for making the instrument enforceable and interoperable, and BIMCO DCSA definitely, as well as ITFA for bills of exchange and promissory notes. And of course, at the legal layer, we want the common law to be released, which is why I put it in amber here. But in the meantime, of course, the contract law solution is very valid if you want to proceed. Industry cooperation is key, which is why ITFA is focusing very specifically on negotiable instrument and EBDTR as part of the DNI initiative. But we have also worked with ICC, which is a key stakeholder in that space. And on the next slide, you see a screenshot from the ICC DSI website that has indeed on the next slide, thank you, Alex, that has endorsed our interoperability approach in Q2 2021. And you can find more information on the DSI website of ICC. So I think it's possibly the first time the industry associations are working so closely together. And now we want to make sure that the banks are benefiting as well as corporates and platforms, assuming their willingness. As Christian said, the willingness on the banking side is a no-brainer, the strong willingness to proceed. And on the platform side, I'm very happy to hear from Grant, there is also very much interest to proceed with interoperable solutions. Going forward, and last slide, on the next slide, you will see more countries indeed adopting MLETR. France definitely very active, as we hear from the Paris Europlace leadership with Philippe and Beatrice. UK also going very much into the voting process on the common law solution, but also Germany is progressing very well through ICC Germany. So also at that level, there is much cooperation at industry level, and the banks involved in the DNI initiative are very much in contact with those, such as Merlin also helping on the US side. So with this, just a short update on what is the latest about the positioning. And I will continue to handle questions in the chat. But in the meantime, I suggest we move on to Ulf's presentation that is specifically focusing on transport and logistics. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Grant and Andrea. I prepared this presentation without knowing what Grant was going to present, so I will rush over a few slides so it doesn't get repetitive. My name is Ulf Eggefors, and I joined Enigio in the spring. I have a background, I've been running 2 trade finance entities in Nordic banks, and I've been a CFO some 20 years of a global commodity trader. So I have bought a lot of shipping services. I've seen BLs in banks, and I've seen BLs in corporates. So that's my background. And please, Alex, next one. So this one is not a copy of Grant's, but I'm going to pass this because it's an overview of the functionality of bill of lading. So let's move to the next. And this is the classical sort of bill of lading overview if you have an export transaction. And we have been, during 3 months, spoken to more than 100 corporates, trading intensive corporates like exporters and commodity traders. And it's obvious that they ask for open systems to have a flexibility to include a freight forwarder in an emerging market or change direction of the shipment. So that has been the conclusion of these interviews that I've carried out. I've also welcomed the standardization, DCSA, BIMCO, FIATA, because that will help enormously in developing the e-bill of lading and other trade document services, which I'm going to come back to. Next one, please. So the reality of trade documents, and this could be seen from the bank perspective or from the corporate, the exporter's perspective. Create time lag and bottlenecks in the logistic process. It's very manual and expensive. We discussed that. Inefficient, tedious work. When I was head of trade finance operations, I had difficulty to employ young, talented people because they used to handle everything digital, and I asked them to look at paper stacks. I don't think they really understood what they were doing. A lot of turnover due to that fact. And there's a complexity in the old-fashioned trade processes. And as Grant rightly pointed out, it's security and fraud risk. And I've been several times, I have been experienced fraud where an email has been hacked and an invoice has been changed into an invoice with a different account number. That has happened to me several times as a CFO. And then, of course, we have the green aspects which is very important. And to meet this, if you take the next one, please, Alex, the transfer time will be down to seconds. A more user-friendly, efficient manual process can be reduced, and we can have a modern working environment. With Trace Original, it will be freely sent, received, managed by anyone in the trade process, within or outside of a trade platform. We are not a platform. I will come back to the difference from a platform. And we have a unique distributed ledger, a public ledger. Technology enables both data security and confidentiality. And of course, the environmental impact is close to zero. Next one, please. So what is Trace Original? You should see Trace Original as an original document. Could be a PDF. It could also be a document that has been printed out of a ledger system, like a accounts payable and invoice. It has an electronic signature, singularity, freely transferable, which means that you can transfer to anyone. Change your medium, but as Grant rightly pointed out, there are some questions about the legality of changing medium from digital to paper. And of course, we have a transparent full audit trail. It's fully protected. No sharing of business or personal data outside of the document. This is important. In a platform, the platform provider, you provide the data and opening up that data. In our fact, we transfer documents. We cannot read what's in the documents. And it's fully interoperable through the digital channel. You can use our product and link it to any other system you like. Next one, please. So you can see this as a PDF that is being digitalized. You can see it as an electronic design original digital document, or as a token, or a digital document with predefined standards inside. That doesn't matter to us. Next one, please. So right now, we are participating in a very important pilot between UK and Singapore. And why UK and Singapore? Well, it has to do with the legislation development, of course. And EDU will participate in partnership with a leading global bank in this pilot. Both parties have experience from cooperation. There has been due diligence of an EDU and Trace Original that it works. It's suitable for EBL and other related trade documents. We will participate both in phase 1, which is a more basic case study and phase 2, which is live. And of course, we are currently discussing which customer we will use for this pilot, and that will obviously design if it's an import customer or if it's an export customer. But one of the beauty of this is that we can provide a solution for SMEs that cannot afford to be part of platforms or handle numerous platforms. And I urge you to be close to this project because it's a good case study that will involve banks, carriers, freight forwarders, trading companies. So it's very, very interesting. Next one, please. So we are going to launch during the autumn a number of pilots for trade documents using Trace Original. Commodity traders, and why? Well, it's due to the volumes and the quick decision making. Commodity traders normally have large volumes of trade finance business, but they are also very quick to make decisions about how they will communicate with their partners. There are requests to include a full set of documents, not only BLs. So when I go out and talk to these corporates, they say this is fine with the focus on BL and the title document, but we want to have an envelope where we can have one process for all our documents. That could be certificates of origin, it could be VGM documents, it could be packing list, invoices. So we will provide that solution to these clients. And traders are also interesting because they make the margin on sourcing, sales, and freight. And they want to have flexibility. They cannot be locked into a platform or be customer of 10 platforms. They want to trade with counterpart X one day, and they want to trade with counterpart Y the next day. So freight is a very, very important factor with commodity traders due to the low margin that they have. And then they demand flexible solutions, including trade to emerging markets where they might have an agent, or to local agents, or where they have a freight forwarder in a port. They want to have that included in the trade process. And they all welcome the standardization of BIMCO and FIATA and DCSA. But we are not a platform. We are interoperable. You should see us as transferring documents digitally. And we await the MLETR development in the countries. In the meantime, we set up the pilots based on contractual law. So we are a bit limited for the time being, but it can work. We want to move on. We want to see progress. I've dealt with too many doc sets in my life. And when I was CFO, I tried to reduce people in the logistic departments, but they all came back and said, look at the piles we have on the desks. It doesn't work. So we are on the same ship as Grant. We are just a different way of looking at our solution. And I believe, referring to Grant again, because you had a very good presentation, is that we need to be many. We need to be many people working together to change this infrastructure. We can't just sit and protect ourselves. We should work together to change an old-fashioned way of dealing with things in banks and in corporates. I think it can be done. We are open. We discuss with all the platforms that was shown earlier. We are different. We're not a platform, but we will fill our role in this development. I'm very optimistic. My only concern, to be open, is that I've spoken to many in trade, and there seems to be one theoretical view on the development. It's happening right now. A lot of things are happening. But then when you talk to big shippers or freight forwarders, they don't see anything happening. And that is, of course, the 1.3% of the bill of ladings that are electronic. But There are less initiatives than I thought 6 months ago when I joined NIJO. I thought more would be cooking in real life, not only at trade conferences in Singapore, where people talk about the bill of lading as it was, I don't know, the lunch for today. It's sort of, when I talk to people in the real trade, it's a long way to go, but we can change it together. And sorry for being late, and I tried to skip some of the obvious ones that Grant had in his presentation. And if you have any questions further down the line, you can reach out to me, and I promise to answer all of them if you need to jump now 20 minutes after set time. So thanks, everyone.
That's all right, Ulf. Thank you very much indeed. We have planned for 90 minutes, and indeed we have already had a few questions. In the interest of time, indeed, I would now invite Emmanuel to provide conclusive remarks. Emmanuel, if you can.
Thank you very much, André. Thank you very much to all our speakers. It has been once again a really fascinating session. I would like to focus my concluding remarks in 3 points. The first one, of course, is that this webinar took place in the global framework of the alliance that has been signed in February between BIMCO, DCSA, FIATA, ICC and SWIFT. And it is very important to consider this webinar as being a part of this global alliance, because as we mentioned it already in many cases, we need cooperation and we need the international framework in order to avoid any further fragmentation in a landscape which is already very complex. The second point is the key role of the ICC. It has been mentioned by all of you, and it is a matter of consensus. Because ICC is a global partner in relationship with the multilateral organization that we will need. We will need at one stage WTO. We will need at one stage the World Customs Organization. And that is why the DSI is so critical in this approach. You know that regarding the MLETR, the global goal for the DSI is to have 100 jurisdictions compliant with the MLETR. So it is very ambitious, and I think that we need more and more national committees that will be committed to this goal, because to be honest, for the moment, first there was ICC UK, then we are together with ICC Germany. In the Legal Reform Advisory Board, there is also the National Committee for Mexico, but not very active, to be honest. So we need more national committees. We need other regions to be on board. There is also, of course, inside the DSI, the objective to promote the existing standards and to work out on a concrete solution in order to ensure interoperability. Now, what did we learn today? It is very clear that there is now an established consensus on the need to go forward for the digital transformation. There is a consensus on the belief that we are in a critical phase, a phase of acceleration due to a certain number of factors. So this is a very positive news as such. There is also consensus on the difficulties to obtain a common move from all the various stakeholders, because there are many, and you name them, each of you. So that means that this process will take time, and in this field, I would like to make some suggestion, because today we deal about 2 trade documents, mainly the bill of lading and promissory notes. And my suggestion will be the following. First, market adoption, because the figures are really so low, you can laugh about these figures. I mean, be it the 1.4 or 1.7% for EBL, this is ridiculously low. So how can we mobilize our energy in direction of the users? We need big figures, and my recommendation will be maybe, as the DSI has done for the MLETR, why couldn't we have a goal of, let's say, 10% of EBL before 2025? I don't know. We need a common purpose for the EBL. We need to work more on market adoption. My second recommendation will be to increase, of course, the critical mass of MLETR compliant countries. Of course, 100, it is a very ambitious, but the key thing, as it has been suggested by Philippe, will be that each jurisdiction with its own legal system will be able to have an influence to make the promotion in its with its neighbors. So for instance, for us, French, we have in our neighborhood all the code civil, the civil code countries, namely in North Africa. So of course, we have here a task that we should carry out. And the same thing, for instance, for ICC UK and the great job that has been carried out with the very numerous countries, members of the Commonwealth. So to organize this critical mass, we need a regional approach. And the last suggestion, it is that in the field of harmonization, we have a lot to do, because in this webinar, I learned that we have at least, maybe there are more, you will tell me, there are at least 2 different standards of EBL. There is one for the container shipping industry, and there is another one for the bulk shipping industry. And now we know also that there are different technologies. And the technology of NEGO has been presented to us, but we know that there are other technologies. So even on a single trade document, a game changer, or the Holy Grail, as Grant named it, we have at least 2 different standards, and we have at least 2 different technologies, platform and the original trade solution. So how can we handle this situation of a lack of harmonization on the very one document that everyone considered to be the game changer? This will be my 3 recommendation: market adoption with one goal in percentage, critical mass with a regional approach, and I encourage you all to work on positively in the harmonization process for the EBL. Thank you very much. It was really a great seminar, and I'm sure that André can provide us with all the slides that have been commented. They are very, very interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Great concluding remarks and a great ambition to move into adoption. Indeed, that's what we are here to help the banks and their counterparties. So very nicely put. Indeed, the recording of this team session will be available, and we're going to make sure this is published as soon as possible. And we also will share the slides. We are reaching the end of the timing of this session. So I suggest we come to a close. Of course, we stay connected, all of us. I'm sure some of you have more questions to handle. And maybe we can organize a separate Q&A session on those topics and invite BIMCO and DCSA again to tell us indeed or more based on input. In the meantime, if some of you have pressing questions, do not hesitate to reach out to us. You know where to find us: Emmanuel, Philippe, Beatrice, or myself. Usually at one point in time, you must have received a mail from us and you must have our email addresses. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us and staying with us for 90 minutes, and looking forward to organizing more sessions on the same topic. Thank you especially to Grant for accepting our invite to present the BIMCO standards, and also looking forward to working on market adoption as suggested by Emmanuel.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Thanks very much. Bye now.